Strange Shadows, a Crumcast and Smith podcast. The deposition of Brother Jerome. I, a poor scrivener and the humblest monk of the Benedictine Abbey of Perrogon, have been asked by our Abbot Theophile to write down this record of a strange evil that is still rampant, still unquelled. And ere I have done writing, it may be that the evil shall come forth again from its lurking place and again be manifest. We, the friars of Perrogon, and all others who have knowledge of this thing, agree that its advent was coeval with the first rising of the red comet which still burns nightly, a flying balefire above the moonless hills. Like Satan's rutilant hair trailing on the wind of Gehenna as he hastens worldward, it rose below the dragon in early summer, and now it follows the scorpion towards the western woods. Some say that the horror came from the comet, flying without wings to earth across the stars. And truly, before this summer of 1369, and the lifting of that red disastrous scourge upon the heavens, there was no rumour or legend of such a thing in all Averoigne.
Greetings, folks, and welcome to Season 4, Episode 2 of Strange Shadows, the Clark Ashton Smith podcast. You just heard the opening paragraph of today's story, The Beast of Averoigne, read by Shelley de Cruz. I'm one of your hosts, Tim Mendes.
And I'm the other one, Rob Poyton. Yes, beyond the new mes amis, we are back in the haunted forest of Averoigne. And I naturally thought this was a werewolf story. See, I don't know that I'd read this one before. In my mind, it was a werewolf story. But it isn't, is it?
No, it isn't. And there's a reason why you thought it was a werewolf story. It's because its original title was The Werewolf of Averoigne when it was being written. And it was intended to be, but at some point it changed. But we'll get on to all that good stuff in just a moment.
Yeah, there's plenty to talk about with this one, isn't there?
Oh,
yeah.
Isn't there just?
But before we do, we've got some fantastic news, I believe, about a certain event in Auburn.
Indeed, yes. This comes from Nils Hedgelin, our Auburn correspondent. A new Clark Ashton Smith conference in Auburn, California is taking place on January the 10th, and it will be held at the historic Auburn Carnegie Library on 175 Almond Street that Smith himself used and was the setting for a scene in The Devotee of Evil. Tentatively, there's going to be 5 discussion panels, including a lunch break, and a variety of authors, artists, and scholars as guests. And that sounds like an absolutely cracking day.
It does. That sounds amazing. I wish we could be there. If there was some mechanism that we could transport ourselves over to Auburn through some sort of gate by a boulder or something.
Yeah. So it's 3 days after my birthday. I'm wondering if I can blag it as a birthday present. I don't know.
A flight to California.
Yeah. Probably have to mortgage a kidney or something. But yeah.
But yeah, fantastic event, and I'm sure all our listeners on that side of the pond will do their best to support it. And yeah, we look forward to hearing a report. I don't know if Nils is going to be recording any of the day. I'm sure there'll be something coming out of it. So we look forward to that as well.
Yes, and I believe you have word on another Smithian podcast that's rearing from the depths.
Well, yeah, this is the guys at the Crumcast, which of course is primarily Robert E. Howard based. Covering not just the Conan stories, but Solomon Kane, Bram McMullen. They also delve off into other areas of sort of sword and sorcery fiction. And of course, they also cover REH's 2 closest companions, Smith and Lovecraft. And they're currently just started a season on Clark Ashton Smith. I think they're covering 4 or 5 stories. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to listening to those. You know, some of them are stories we've covered, some aren't, but it's always interesting to hear other people's takes on these things. And I think it's, as we often say, although these are, in inverted commas, pulp stories, once you start digging in, there's a lot to be dug.
Indeed, and it's always interesting to hear what other people dig into, because obviously things that spark my interests, such as the more salacious ends of things, are not going to be what spark the interest of other people, right?
Yes, well, we'll draw a discreet veil. So yeah, and of course we'll put the link to the Crumcast in the show notes below as well. Okay, so let's head back into Averoigne, a rather perilous Averoigne. Well, I suppose it's always rather perilous, but in this story, it's downright perilous. I think this beast gets about 50 people, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, it's got quite a body count, and I would say this would be one. You know, we're always talking about which ones would be good to adapt. This would be perfect for Hammer horror, right?
Oh yes, oh yes.
Like that classic Hammer horror. I mean, you can already do sort of fantasy casting. You know, the Abbot's got to be. It's got to be Christopher Lee or Vincent Price, right?
Yeah,
one or the other.
As long as Michael Ripper's in there somewhere, he'll be the lone woodsman. Oi, what's that?
Or the guy in the chainmail towards the end, the man at arms.
Yes, and I'm seeing that camera monster point of view as it closes in on some screaming hapless victim in the woods.
Yeah,
you know,
with a cello behind it.
Yes. So, this being Averoigne, I've got quite a list of words here, actually. I thought there was some fantastic language in this, and there's one or two parts that I'm really have to read out as we get on.
Yeah. A lot of the language is with the words. A lot of them I flagged up before, so I'm not flagging them up again. But there is a lot of phrases which I'm just going to highlight as we go through the story. But there was a couple that I did have to look up. The first one that I had to look up was rutilant, which is, I love it. It's a great word because it's referring to rutilant hair of Satan or something like that, right? And it means glowing or glittering with red or golden light. And I'm keeping that one in the back pocket because that's going in a story at some point.
Yeah, and I had never seen that word at all before. Never. I had to look that one up as well. As in fact, I had to with my first choice, pernoctations.
Nice.
Which is basically stay in the night, or implies really a vigil or an overnight watch. Pernoctations.
Yeah, that's the other one I had to look up as well. And again, when anybody talks about anything like that, I'm reminded of that episode of Father Ted, where they have to stay vigil over Father Jack because they think he's dead, but he sits up at the end. Yeah, but that's another one I was not familiar with at all. One that I don't know whether had it before or not, but I really like the sound of it. Consanguinity, which means descendant from the same ancestor.
Yes, there's a nice use of that. Now, there was a word that I do know. I always like the sound of it, and of course, I like the meaning of it even more. Postern. Back entrance.
Yes. And because you brought it up, I'm going to have to bring up Rambling Sid Rumpo.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah. The Ballad of the Wogglers Mooley.
Yes.
For those who don't know, Rambling Sid Rumpo was an alter ego of Kenneth Williams, and he was a folk singer, and he talked his own sort of brand of Polari and gibberish, basically, and it's all absolute filth, and it's tremendous. But yeah,
there was a young cord wangler, wasn't it, and all that stuff.
Yeah, they hung him by the postern, nailed his moolie to the fence.
That was it. Yeah. I shall put a link up with that. I think we probably have before, but it seems to fit in very well with Averoigne, doesn't it? That particular song.
Oh, it does. It's great. Yeah.
A couple of other words that I sort of knew the meaning of as well, but just like the sound. Satanry. Isn't that marvelous? Satanry.
That was one of the ones I was going to bring up. Yeah.
Damn you and your infernal Satanry, sir.
Yeah.
In fact, that's relatively recent. The first noted use of that is in the 1850s.
Is it?
Oh, that's quite a new one for Smith.
Now, the next one I'm bringing up here is Malebolge, which is the 8th circle of hell in Dante's Inferno. It's described as a large funnel-shaped cavern, itself divided into 10 concentric circular trenches or ditches, each called a bolgia, which is Italian for pouch or ditch. and long causeway bridges run from the outer circumference of Malebolge to its centre, pictured as spokes on a wheel. At the centre of Malebolge is the 9th and final circle of hell. I can't help thinking, was that like the design for those Victorian prisons? You know, them ones that were, you know?
Oh,
If you think about it, it's
yeah.
very much like Malebolge.
Very true. Yeah, yeah. It puts me in mind of one of the Hellraiser films as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Where I think they go to hell, don't they? In one of them.
It's the second one.
It's the second one, is it?
Yeah.
I had one that I thought, I'm sure Tim knows this. I had to look it up. Chines, which is a cut of meat basically from the spine.
Indeed.
Yeah. Now, of course, there's other meanings to the word chines. Anyone who's been to Blackgang Chine on holiday.
I was going to say, if you've been on the Isle of Wight, yeah.
But yeah, chines in this sense, referring to the spine, which obviously is something that crops up a few times in this story. And I'll just finish with two more, if I may. Well, one is a phrase, but I'll start with another word that, again, I had to look up. I kind of had a general sense of it. Corposant. Now, there's two meanings for this.
Nice one, isn't it?
Yeah, again, a lovely sound, corposant. One meaning is a reference to St. Elmo's fire, that sort of plasma that plays around the mastheads and that kind of thing. But it's also a derivative of corpo santo, meaning holy body. So I think that's more the use that Smith is going for here.
Yeah.
And finally, one of my favourite phrases, or certainly my favourite phrase of this series so far. I know we're only 2 stories in, but Phlegethonian lustre. Come on.
Oh, that was good. That was my band name. Damn it, you've nicked it. That was my band name for this week. Phlegethonian lustre.
I don't know about band name. I think that's going to be my stage name, my band name, the name of the house, the name of the cat.
Oh, Phlegethonian lustre, come for your dinner.
Phleggy.
Phleggy. Love it.
Yeah, Phlegethon, of course. I think you referenced that last time as well. One of the rivers of Hades. It's the burning river, I think, isn't it?
It is. Yeah.
Phlegethonian lustre. Oh, I think that should be like a hairspray or something. You know?
It sounds like a very goth hairspray, doesn't it? Phlegethonian lustre. Oh, Alchemy Gothic have missed a trick there.
Oh, yeah. Well, there you go. There's a Clark Ashton Smith line of goth product. Yeah. Don't go out without your Phlegethonian lustre.
Well, there you go. Satanic rutilant. There you go. That's your red hair dye, isn't it?
So, as of course is usual with the Averoigne tales, chock full of baroque and choice language. And I gather this one has got something of a twisted publication history, or
torturous.
Torturous
is probably closer to the truth. Yeah, settle in, dear listener. This may take some time. Smith finished the story on June the 18th, 1932. Now, he was convinced Weird Tales would take it due to its horror, which it is one of the most straight horror things I think Smith has ever written. Now, sadly, Wright rejected it with no specific criticism, just that he didn't like it as much as some of his other medieval works.
FFS, as usual.
Yeah, exactly. Smith had been quite sure that he was going to get taken. He wrote to August Derleth on June the 28th, 32. I sent the Beast of Averoigne to Wright some time ago, but have not yet learned its fate. A tale is full of cumulative horrors, so I see no reason why he shouldn't take it. So as you'd imagine, the fact that he didn't take it was a bit of a blow to Smith. So he followed that up with a letter to August Derleth on July the 10th when he'd heard back. Wright returned The Beast of Averoigne with no specific criticism, merely saying that he didn't like it as well as my other medieval stories. I'm going to send you the carbon in a day or two and ask you to look it over with an idea to structural or other flaws. Personally, I don't quite see why it was rejected, unless the documentary mode of presentation may have led me into more archaism than was palatable to write. The Abbot's letter to Teresa might be cut out, thus deepening the mystery, but I can't quite make up my mind in this. Anyway, I'd like to know your reactions. So, yeah, once it had been sent over, Derleth replied to this with quite a detailed thing on it. So this letter came on the 23rd of July. Now, as for the Beast of Averoigne, which I read recently with much enjoyment, as you hinted, the tale is, I feel, too much diffuse, and I would suggest telling the entire story from the point of view of Luc le Chaudronnier. This part held my best attention, while I felt that the others dragged slightly. If, however, you insist upon using the other two depositions, you can use them nicely enough by inserting them directly into Luc's narrative, as if he had come upon them and was here fitting the usual facts together. It is, of course, no secret in your version as to whom the beast will turn out to be. This should be covered up just a little more, though I realise that you've done very well with it as it is. I was at first very much against the Comet business, but I've come to see that it's a very vital indeed and contributes much to the plot, so of course that has to be kept. Though it might be somewhat soft-pedalled, merely my personal reaction and in no sense of the word a criticism. I feel that if you open with Luke's narrative, shorten the other two depositions and include them as presented by Luke, and then continue with Luke's story, the tale as a whole will be immeasurably tightened. I hope that helps. Meanwhile, best wishes as always, August. So Smith did this over the course of the next month, and when he basically took time to rework a few stories that Wright had rejected. So he incorporated Derleth's suggestions into Beast, and he eliminated 1,400 words.
Wow, that's a big chunk.
Isn't it? By cutting the Abbot's letter entirely, and he told Jerome's tale in Luke's words, and yeah, much to Smith's growing frustration, he once more rejected the tale, which is baffling to me. So he again took it off and attacked it with the editing shears, cutting it down to 4,000 words and gave it a revised ending. Now, this worked, and it was accepted and appeared in the May 1933 issue. Now, this gives me a speculation here, which I'm going to get to in just a moment.
Right.
But the version we are going off is kind of a halfway house between the two. So the version in The Maze of the Enchanter, The Collected Fantasies, Volume 4, restores the tripartite organization of the story, eliminating the redundant portions of Luke's narrative while keeping the revised climax. So basically, we've got the best of version of the story.
Yeah.
And I think it works absolutely tremendously. But yeah, that ending was reworked on Derleth's suggestion of making it more of a mystery who was going to turn out to be the beast, because it was kind of more explicit to begin with.
Right, yeah.
Now, the speculation that I just mentioned there, it goes back to what we were talking about last time, about Wright always taking fillers and things like this. I wonder if the reason he rejected it had nothing to do with how much he liked the story or whether he thought it had merit. It was too bloody long.
Yeah, I would imagine so.
I wonder if that had more bearing on the fact, and I wonder if that's a lot of the time the problem. Because if you think about it, Mountains of Madness, bloody long.
Yeah.
You know, and I do wonder. So he got it down to 4,000 words. That's essentially a filler. You can put that in any space.
Yeah, I think there's probably a lot to that. And again, from a strictly editorial point of view, I mean, I've edited magazines in the past.
Mm.
Space is an issue, especially back then with a print magazine. Nowadays, it's much easier, even if you're actually printing a physical copy, because you can tweak your layout much easier these days. Back then, you're stuck with a certain typeface and all the rest of it, I guess.
Yeah. Now, just before we move off this and into the story itself, I just want to bring up something else, because I found, I like to have a delve into the eerie. Now, this ties into what we were talking about last time, and what we were talking about when we covered the fungi from Yuggoth in the recent Patron episode as well, about the appreciation at the time. Now, this here should give Farnsworth Wright pause for thought. Now, the first letter is from Richard Dodson, who I'll get to in a moment, who writes, I wish to drop a note to the Erie of appreciation and commendation for the work of one of your authors, who I believe is not yet fully appreciated, Clark Ashton Smith. I have never seen such a consistently excellent Weird Tales author. His strange, beautifully worded stories cannot be equaled for weird, fantastic atmosphere. Clark Ashton Smith looms superior to any other of your regular contributors. You cannot give us too many stories by him. Yeah, again, I couldn't agree more. Now, Dodson was something of a super fan of weird tales and weird fiction in general, who corresponded with Smith along with people such as A. Merritt. Now, in one of the very early Patreon episodes that we went into letters, we read some of Dodson's letters because they were very kindly given to me by Mark from 30 Plus Minutes with HPL podcast. So, and I do intend to go back to them at some point. Now, what we were talking about learned people reading weird tales, this highlights exactly what I was saying. He was a chemist with a doctorate at Johns Hopkins and worked on the Manhattan Project. He was also a professor at Columbia.
Wow.
And there he was in his spare time, firing off how much he loved Clark Ashton Smith.
So we know what Farnsworth seemed to think of the majority of Weird Tales readers, but this guy bucks that trend totally, right?
Yeah, this is it.
You must think at some point, if you're an editor, if you're getting that sort of mail in consistently and regularly, which seemed to be the case, you've got to stop and think at some point, surely.
Well, exactly. I mean, because there's another one just below it from James B. Lynch Jr. from Pittsburgh. My favourite authors are Clark Ashton Smith and Carl Jacobi. Smith is the invulnerable master of his work. His stories are a rich blending of literary perfection and inexhaustible imagination.
Lovecraft was saying exactly the same as well, right? It was because of Lovecraft that he got in Weird Tales in the first place, pretty much.
Yeah.
You know, Wright seemed to have very few issues with Lovecraft as a writer. He seemed to respect him.
Exactly.
If everyone is telling you this guy is a genius, why aren't you listening? Again, was it just, as you mentioned there, just on a practical level, oh, I've got 35 pages and that's not going to fit? And, yeah.
I do wonder because, I mean, you know, I've edited anthologies and things, and there's not so much of a problem with that. But even then, longer stories are a harder sell, which is something I have to deal with quite a lot because, yeah, you know, I can't stick to a word count with a gun to my head.
You're among friends here, Tim. It's all right.
Yeah, I know. I know you're just as bad.
True.
Ask us for a short story and you get a novella.
Well, a short story is about 8,000 words.
Well, exactly. This is it. This is it. And these letters are talking about this story, the Beast of Averoigne.
Yeah.
Which is a story that he rejected twice. So if that was me reading these, I'd have gone, maybe I shouldn't have rejected that twice, you know?
Yeah, and I don't know if it was this story or one of the others I was looking at, that it really did knock Smith's confidence quite a bit.
It was this one. It was this one.
Yeah, because, I mean, as I say, there's some amazing language in here and amazing descriptions and everything else. And I think plot-wise and pace-wise, it totally holds up. I don't see any problems with it at all.
I love it. It's become one of my favourites reading it. Reading this sort of like best of version. It's definitely one of my favourites. It's hard to beat.
Very strange, but there we go. That's the wacky world of publishing,
isn't it?
You know, too many notes, right? We're back to that again. The eternal struggle of art and commerce.
Yep.
So let's get into the story itself. And I actually like this structure. I think this is quite an unusual structure for Smith, this epistolary structure. Much more Lovecraft, really, isn't it?
Yeah. It is. It is. But it's one of those things which is kind of like Marmite, because I've had complaints about one of my stories because it was done like this. Because it's like, I got into this thing and then you went off to a different narrator and then you went back to and it broke it for me. But then other people were like, I really like that. So it's kind of one of those things. You either like it or you don't. Personally, I think it's great. It's incredibly hard to write, though.
Yeah. Yeah, you've got to keep track of a lot of stuff, right? But it is presenting things from different points of view, which, well, you know, it worked all right for Bram Stoker, didn't it?
Well, didn't it just? Yeah.
So I think it's one of the staples of the Weird Tale in a lot of ways.
Oh, yeah.
So we start with the deposition of Brother Jerome. And yes, as we know, of course, we're back in Averoigne and we're back at Perigon, the Abbey of Perigon, the centre of the Benedictines. And the year is 1369. So as far as the Averoigne cycle goes, we're pretty much smack in the middle, because we've got all our Azedarac and gargoyles a couple of hundred years before this, and then we come right up to, I think 1789 was the end of the story, but Faustflame gets a mention in this as well.
I was going to say, yeah, there's quite a few Easter eggs.
Yeah, it references both past and future Averoigne, which is a nice touch, I thought.
Mm.
And am I right in saying this is the summer of 1369?
Indeed, yes. And truly before this summer of 1369. So, of course, my brain went off on a tangent because, yes, the summer of 1369, summer of 69. Standing on the abbey porch, I thought hunger would last forever. Oh, and when I chewed her hand, I knew that it was now or never. Oh, it was the coming of the night.
Tim Mendes is available for parties, bar mitzvahs, and weddings, and I'm his agent. I take 20%. So there you go. Just put that out there. You never know. You never know.
Couldn't help it.
Oh, marvelous, marvelous. And very quickly, we hear about this comet, the first rising of the red comet, which still burns nightly. Now, of course, comets during this time were seen as portents. And we know in England, for example, during the medieval era, there were at least 9 comet sightings that were believed to be portents, the most famous being 1066 and Halley's Comet, of course. And at the time, it seems that comets were thought of as being the exhalations of the Earth. It wasn't really until 16th, 17th century that they were recognized as being from outer space. But it's just kind of interesting in this story because it's seen as being from outer space straight away.
Like he packs in so many wonderful little phrases here to describe this comet, doesn't he? Flying balefire, Satan's rutilant hair, trailing on the wind of Gehenna, rose below the dragon, now follows the scorpion. It's so evocative right from the get-go.
Yes, yes. And speaking of good phrases, I wonder if he had read this one. I imagine being Smith, he probably had. This is from the Venerable Bede, who of course was an Anglo-Saxon monk who lived in Northumbria in the late 7th and early 8th centuries. In chapter 25 of his scientific treatise De Natura Rerum, on the nature of things, he describes comets as stars with flames like hair. They are born suddenly, portending a change of royal power, or plague, or wars, or winds, or heat. Stars with flames like hair. That fits in quite nicely with this, doesn't it?
It really does. Especially, I must deem that the beast is a spawn from the 7th hell, a foulness born of the bubbling flame-blent ooze. It's so good right from the get-go.
Now, Brother Jerome, I think, as in most of the Averoigne stories, we see Smith having a little bit of a dig at the church, don't we, in several ways, some quite subtle. And our Brother Jerome is, St. Benedict forbids eating during his time away from the monastery. He has a bite or two to eat. He's also not really supposed to drink alcohol. Well, he has a glass of white wine or two in Zenobie. So he's one of those type of monks, probably a quite jocular fellow.
Yeah, kind of Friar Tuck kind of chap, I'm kind of seeing. But this goes back to, because you mentioned there, the reference to the Chateau de Fausenflamme. The guy in that with his hidden drawer of naughty parchments,
I'm going to leave you in my library, but don't look at the naughty books.
Yeah.
I wanted to read this paragraph in particular because this is, peak Smith. The day had vanished, fading unaware, and the long summer eve without moon had thickened to a still and eldritch darkness ere I approached the abbey postern, and hurrying along the forest path, I felt an eerie fear of the gnarled hunchback oaks and their pit-deep shadows. And when I saw, between their antic boughs, the vengefully streaming fire of the new comet, which seemed to pursue me as I went, the goodly warmth of the wine died out, and I began to regret my truancy, for I knew that the comet was a harbinger of ill, an omen of death and Satanry to come.
Class. Absolute class.
So from the start, obviously this comet is seen as a portent of doom. And I like this. The brother here seems to take it quite personally. It's almost like the comet is pursuing him individually. Guilty conscience. I wonder what else he was getting up to on the road, to be honest.
Yeah, exactly. Well, here's that thing, right? You've done something slightly, not 100% legal. You hear a siren. It's one of them, isn't it? Right?
Duck into a doorway.
Yeah, it's one of them.
And we get our first sighting of the beast very early on. And I like this as well, that he likens it to a Fanfire. I saw a light was near at hand beneath the lowering bough beside my path, or moreover it moved as with the flitting of a restless Fanfire. Now, this is something we've spoken about before, obviously my time out in the fens. Lots of legends out there of the tricksy lights that lure one into the depths of the fens. And in fact, I think I mentioned before, near where I used to live, they opened a new bridge and they named it after the creature, it's not jack-o'-lantern, I can't remember the name now.
Will-o'-the-wisp.
Something like that, had a particular Fenland name, that sort of thing. Yeah,
right.
So, that is still very much in the consciousness in that part of the country.
It's interesting because as soon as I read Fanfire, I knew that you would latch onto that because it's like, yeah, you lived in the fens. I mean, I've camped in the fens, and I've never lived there.
You're camp everywhere.
I've camped the length and breadth of Britain. I'll have you know.
Carry on camping. Yeah. And this is where it surprised me, because I said it may be that I haven't read this one before because I was expecting the werewolf experience. We get something very, very different. I beheld the thing to which the light clung like a hellish nimbus, moving as it moved, and revealing dimly the black abomination of head and limbs that were not those of any creature wrought by God. The horror stood erect, rising to the height of a tall man, and it moved with the swaying of a great serpent, and its members undulated as if they were boneless. The round black head, having no visible ears or hair, was thrust forward on a neck of snakish length. Two eyes, small and lidless, glowing hotly as coals from a wizard's brazier, were set low and near together in the noseless face above the serrate gleaming of bat-like teeth.
It's a great description of a creature, isn't it? I was brought to mind, do you remember the old 50s B movie, The Thing from Outer Space? I was brought for that. It brought that to mind for some reason.
What was the Hammer film? Was it The Reptile or something?
The Reptile.
Well? Yeah, that sort of feeling. Yeah. And for some other reason, I got Mothman.
Oh, yeah.
From Pittsburgh kind of thing, and that sort of area.
Yeah, the Mothman legends. Yeah. Yeah, it's great because I think, again, it's because it was originally called The Werewolf of Averoigne and was going to be about a werewolf, but then he changed his mind. So,
which I think makes it a lot more effective as a weird tale in many ways. It goes from being supernatural to weird. And I mean, I like a good werewolf story as much as anyone else.
Oh, yeah.
In fact, I think what I often get this type of story confused with is Robert E. Howard in The Forest of Villefort.
Yeah. That is a werewolf story.
Which is a werewolf story. Yeah. That was printed in Weird Tales in August 1925, I believe. And yeah, in my mind, I always place that in Averoigne, even though he doesn't name it as such.
Yeah, there's also echoes of Carl Edward Wagner's Reflections from the Winters of My Soul as well.
Yes.
It's similar kind of setup in it.
And I suppose in a sense it is a similar setup in that the monster is a person. So part of the thing of the werewolf story is who is the werewolf, right? And in this, the alien creature, we're never quite sure what it is really, but we know who it is or who it has possessed. At least we find out as we go on.
Yeah, another thing this brought to mind, so Nils, get your bingo card ready, is the mid-80s Doctor Who story, The Visitation, which is set in a medieval Britain around the time of the Great Fire of London. And that starts with a comet falling to Earth and the villagers getting freaked out by it. And then there was mysterious deaths attributed to a plague and lizard people called the Terileptils. So,
that's a good name, Terileptils. I like that.
Yeah, Terileptils. Yeah. It's a Peter Davison story. It's quite a good one as well.
And I like the fact that we get this mention that there's no previous myth of any creature like this. This is something completely new. So yeah, they know about vampires and werewolves, and we've had Pan knocking around for a bit and all that kind of stuff. This is something new, even for the people in Averoigne. No one's really got a clue what it is.
Yeah, I really liked that. The fact that it says, yeah, werewolves, vampires. What the hell this was, I have no idea. You know.
But it starts leaving trace of itself very soon. Well, initially, it's a huge stag is found, which had been slain in some ungodly fashion, not by wolf or hunter or poacher. It was unmarked by any wound, other than a wide gash that had laid bare the spine from neck to tail. And the spine itself had been shattered, and the white marrow sucked therefrom, but no other portion of the stag had been devoured. So this becomes a running theme throughout the story, that the thing is after the marrow from the spine. I thought this was quite advanced sort of science fiction stuff, wasn't it, really?
Yeah.
Again, we can zoom forward to Star Trek or any number of films. It's not just a monster that kills people. No, it wants to drink your spinal fluid, or it wants to eat your brain, or it needs the body's salt in order to survive.
Yeah. And it reminds me a little bit of Frank Belknap Long's Space Eaters.
Yes.
Because that's that thing that sort of falls on people and sucks the brain out of the back of their head, kind of thing.
I think I met a few of them, actually. Certainly online. It gets even grimmer pretty quick because this thing starts digging up corpses, right?
At first, it did not strike at living men, but assailed the helpless dead like some foul eater of carrion. 2 freshly buried corpses were found lying in the cemetery at St. Zenobi, where the thing had dug them from their graves and had laid open their vertebrae. In each case, only a little of the marrow had been eaten, but, as if in a rage or disappointment, the cadavers had been torn into shreds from crown to heel, and the tatters of their flesh were mixed inextricably with the rags of their cerements. Yeah. There's also dead wolves found with their chines laid open and the spinal marrow gone, an ox and a horse. Yeah. It's pretty grim right from the get-go. And it's like back to what you were saying in that letter to August Derleth, that it is pretty much horror from page 1 to the end. There's no let-up.
Yeah, this is horror on a few different levels, isn't it? Because there's a supposed supernatural element. It's potentially an alien. We've got the body horror. We've got the who is it? We've got the thing element. We don't know which of us it is.
Oh, I hadn't thought about the thing, but yeah, it's quite a similar setup, really, if you think about it. Something that's fallen to earth that takes the form of somebody.
Yeah. And it's the charcoal burners start getting it now, right? It's always the poor, right, who are first in line. I suppose they live in little huts out in the forest somewhere. And you have to kind of laugh at this. On the night following the desecration of the graves, 2 charcoal burners were slain foully in their hut. Other charcoal burners dwelling nearby heard the shrill screams that fell to sudden silence, and peering fearfully through the chinks of their bolted doors, they saw anon in the grey starlight the departure of a black, obscenely glowing shape that issued from the hut. I like the fact they bolt their doors and stay inside.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Not till dawn did they dare to verify the fate of their hapless fellows. That is human nature right there, isn't it?
That's the way it goes, mate. Sorry, but I would have helped, but, So this is where we get our mention of the Abbot, theophile, who calls in Brother Jerome and questions him closely about the apparition. And of course, Jerome's story is disbelieved at first, but then with all these corpses turning up or being dug up and all the rest of it, it's obvious that something is going on. And I suppose the charcoal burners, their testament adds weight to Jerome's story. Now, when you know the ending of the story, and of course, spoiler alert, you kind of see these clues quite obvious. But again, if you didn't know, I'm not sure that it would be so obvious, because this is the description of the abbot. How, from his over-strict austerities and vigils, with hollow cheeks and burning eyes, Theophile called me before him and made me tell my story over and over, listening as one who flagellates himself for a fancied sin, Truly, he said, there is a great devil among us that has risen with the comet from Malebolge. We, the monks of Paragon, must go forth with cross and holy water to hunt the devil in its hidden lair, which lies haply at our very portals. I think even the dialogue is so good in this. It's very medieval in feel, but you can understand it, if you know what I mean. It's not dense, is it?
I really like that kind of thing because, yeah, the feel is right without going foldy-roldy-ray-do day.
The hey nonny nonny.
Hey nonny nonny, yeah.
So they set up a monthly posse, I suppose. Is what they're all out there, armed with crucifixes and good intentions.
Mm.
And it's like they're wandering around with lifted crosses, praying and whatever, wandering around.
It's Monty Python, isn't it? Jesu Domine.
It is, yeah.
Bonaeis requiem.
And they go all over, from deep caves where they find nothing fiercer than a wolf or a badger. And this is where we get a Flam mentioned, the ruined castle said to be haunted by vampires, which of course it is, as we find out in a couple of 100 years' time.
Yeah, it's interesting that this is a prequel.
Yeah, you wonder if there's some connection now, don't you?
Yeah. I might have to go back and reread it to see, you know.
And we get those other Easter eggs and all. We get mention of Lafrene and Zeems, of course. But this is Smith's world building in action again, right? There's not a big, in 1156, blah, 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 but you just get these little lines here and there that flesh out the setting. So that's pretty much it for our first letter. We do get a mention, this made me laugh, of a brother peering from his window from the abbey, seeing the beast as it glided between the rows of peas and turnips, going toward the forest.
Well, that's a classic scene from horror movies, isn't it, right? It's usually like the maid or something glances out of the inn window and sees a fiend flitting through the through the garden kind of thing, right?
Yeah. Well, I just couldn't help thinking about the song about the farmer who sits amongst his cabbages and peas, you know.
Oh, right, yeah. I want to get off that or we will be on to the Marrow song before we know it. Oh, what a beauty.
So then we're on to the letter of Theophile to Sister Therese, who is both, as we find out in the first line, to you, my sister in God, as well as by consanguinity. So she's a sister in the sense that she's a nun, but is also his actual sister. This is his point of view. And very quickly, we learn of the death of Brother Jerome, slain at evening in his cell while he was copying an Alexandrian manuscript. So is this Brother Jerome being targeted, or is this coincidence?
Well, that's it, because now it seems like the monks themselves are the target, right? Because now the fiend has become even bolder. For last night it entered the dormitory where the brothers sleep in their robes, girded and ready to rise instantly, and without waking the others, on whom it must have cast a Lethian spell, it took Brother Augustine, slumbering on his pallet at the end of the row. Yeah, and this carries on now, like you say. This has got a body count akin to the Terminator, hasn't it?
It is like a Predator movie, isn't it? This kind of thing as well. Yeah, it's relentless, and it's without relent. And I like that little touch as well about the Lethian spell. Is this a natural ability of this creature, that it can put things into a deep slumber? Perhaps that's how it catches wolves. Because, I mean, you know, catching a wolf or a stag, they're pretty difficult to sneak up on, right?
Yeah. Back to Star Trek, right? I'm almost hearing that. Ooh. Does it lull them to sleep with an almost siren-esque quality?
Yeah. And that point of view camera again coming in.
Yeah.
Slightly shaky.
Vaseline on the lens.
Hey. So this is where they go full on holy orders. We get exorcisms, we get holy water sprinkled at the doors and windows, and prayers offered to God and Christ and all the holy saints. And as is usually the case in Averoigne, in Smith stories, none of that has any effect whatsoever.
No, none at all.
And this is really serious now, because it's going to affect the good fame of the Abbey, right? The reputation of the Abbey is in peril. I deem it an humiliating thing and a derogation and pollution of our sanctity that a foul fiend should have ingress to our halls unhindered and at will. There are strange whispers among the brothers who believe that Satan himself has risen to haunt us. Several have met the beast even in the chapel, where it has left an unspeakably blasphemous sign of its presence. Bolts and locks are vain against it, and vain is the lifted cross to drive it away. It comes and goes at its own choosing. I suppose we can guess at what the blasphemous sign of its presence is, because, you know, anything that eats has other bodily functions as well. So.
Indeed. Indeed. Yeah.
And then we get another little clue. And there are those among the brothers who believe it menaces me, the elected abbot of Périgord, since many have seen it gliding along the hall outside my cell.
And Brother Constantine, the cellarer, who returned late from a visit to Vion not long ago, swears that he saw it by moonlight as it climbed the wall towards the window of my cell, which faces the great forest. And seeing Constantine, the thing dropped to the ground like a huge ape and vanished among the trees.
So I suppose in a sense it would be natural if it's targeting the abbey, it would be natural that this thing would go for the top man, right? You might think.
Oh, yeah.
So perhaps that's what allays any suspicions there.
Yeah, especially if, you know, they believe it to be an agent of Satan or something, then it's going to go for the holiest of holies, right? It's going to go for the big cheese.
Yeah, yeah. But the abbot himself then writes this about he retires early to his cell with the intention of spending the nocturnal hours in vigil and prayer. Each night a stupor falls upon me as I kneel before the Christ on the silver crucifix, and oblivion steeps my senses in its poppy. That's a very nice phrase. And I lie without dreams on the cold floor till dawn. So he's basically going into some sort of deep sleep at night. Again, this is quite sort of classic werewolf stuff, isn't it? He sort of wakes up with your clothes all torn and fur in your mouth or something from something you've eaten last night.
Yeah, because I mean, he even tries like more sort of physical things to keep his mind sharp. And I guess, you know, haircloth have I worn, and thorns and thistle burrs have I strewn on the floor to awake me from this evil and ineluctable slumber that is like the working of some orient drug. But the thorns and thistles are as a couch of my paradisal ease, and I feel them not till dawn. It's, yeah. And he carries on that surely I have become the victim of a spell, and am holden by a baleful enchantment, while the beast is abroad with its hellish doings. So he's convinced that he's been drugged, or, like we were saying, a sort of siren-esque quality to it, to the beast, which is logical.
Yeah, and he is leaning towards this theory that the beast comes nightly to Earth from the red comet, which is still hanging up above them in the sky. And by day it returns to the comet, having eaten its fill of that provender for which it seeks.
Mm.
So you've got that sci-fi element, but in the eyes of the people experiencing this, they're still talking about this being a whisper from the pit, right? This is demonic in nature.
I love stories that do that. You know, that there is a scientific explanation. It's a science fiction explanation for things, but the people involved think, well, you know, cross ourselves and it's Satan and his minions, you know.
And it could be any of them.
Exactly.
Kind of thing.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's quite thingy if you think about it, if that's even a word.
If we can have Satanry, we can have thingery. How about that?
Thingery. Well, no, yeah, because a thingy brings to mind Blackadder, doesn't it?
Shaped like a turnip.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, that he closes his letter just really warning his sister to, you know, stay in your cloisters, stay safe, pray that such things may touch you not, nor approach you in the quiet cloisters of the convent at Zimes. Alas, that is not to be, as we find out in part 3, the story of Luc de Shawanier. And this account opens with a great line. Old age, like a moth in some fading arras, will gnaw my memories over soon, as it gnaws the memories of all men. How poetic is that?
Mm-hmm.
And this is the guy who's going to kill it, right? Because he lets us know that pretty much straight away. And so he's going to write this account of what happened. And then the record shall be sealed in a brazen box, and that box be set in a secret chamber of my house at Zimes, so that no man shall learn the dreadful verity of this matter till many years and decades have gone by. So that sort of sets us up to wonder. Again, there's an inkling that this is more than just a strange monster from somewhere. There's something else going on. And this is where we learn the body count, that over the summer of 1369, the summer of 69, 50 people. I mean, that's some body count, isn't it? Especially in those times.
Indeed.
And it seems to centre about the Abbey of Périgord, but also has turned up in Zimes and Saint-Zénobie and La Frenay. And the church and state alike are powerless to curb its maraudings, so that a dire terror fell upon the land, and people went to and fro as in the shadow of death. Now, this guy is something of a sorcerer. Well, actually, is a is a pretty good sorcerer. And I thought, again, this was interesting. This is the church turning to sorcerers again, isn't it? Which is a consistent theme in these stories.
Yeah, because this guy makes use of geomancy and necromancy, which I can't imagine the church are kind of happy about. But I guess if all else fails, right? You know, the enemy of my enemy is my friend and all that.
Yeah. And even last time with the mandrakes, right? The local clergy weren't averse to those practices because they were among those benefiting from the root.
The rumpy pumpy juice.
But this is interesting because Le Chaudronnier consults with his familiars, and they profess themselves ignorant, saying that the beast was altogether alien and beyond the ken of sublunar devils. So we've got this idea of these two things existing simultaneously. Yes, there's aliens from out there somewhere, but, you know, we've got our little devils and demons down here on Earth as well. It's an interesting mix.
Yeah. What I thought was really interesting, because you mentioned all the callbacks to other Averoigne stories, but now we get callbacks to the Hyperborea cycle. Because then I bethought me of the ring of Eibon, which I had inherited from my fathers, who were also wizards. The ring had come down, it was said, from ancient Hyperborea, and it was made of a redder gold than any that the earth yields in latter cycles, and was set with a great purple gem, sombre and smouldering, whose like is no longer to be found. And in the gem an antique demon was held captive, a spirit from pre-human worlds and ages, which would answer the interrogation of sorcerers.
Nice. I have to say, when I hear antique demon, I think cheap as chips.
Oh, God.
That's one for British listeners. We'll get that.
That's funny. Hilarious that he's from Stockport.
Is he really?
Yeah. He's from down the road from me.
Blimey. Wasn't Lovejoy supposedly modelled on him? But for listeners outside the UK, we're talking about a guy called David Dickinson.
That's the one.
Who's an antique dealer and sort of TV celebrity. He pops up on a load of antique programs. One of his catchphrases is, "Oh, that's cheap as chips." So there we go.
Yeah.
Luke decides that he's going to question the demon inside the ring. This is another trope that's very strong in Howard in particular. I think he even had a story called The Demon of the Ring.
He did.
Yeah.
He did. Yeah.
This idea of an ancient vengeful spirit or some spirit locked inside. I guess it's a bit of a standard of occult lore, perhaps. And Smith has used that himself in other ways as well.
Brian Lumley used it quite a lot in his Titus Crow stories as well.
Right, yeah.
You know, because Titus Crow often consulted these things from outside that were trapped in, like, trinkets. I wonder if he got that from Smith, because, you know, it's possible.
Yeah. Also reminds me of the last incantation, Malagris.
Yeah.
He had a familiar, the coral viper, who lived in the head of the unicorn that was stuck above his door, right?
Yeah, that's the one.
So we get this nice little scene of a sort of ritual. We get a small brazier filled with hotly burning amber. The demon made answer, speaking in a voice that was like the shrill singing of fire. It told me the origin of the beast, which belonged to a race of stellar devils that had not visited the earth since the foundering of Atlantis. And it told me the attributes of the beast, which in its own proper form was invisible and intangible to men, and could manifest itself only in a fashion supremely abominable. Moreover, it informed me of the one method by which the beast could be banished, if overtaken in a tangible shape. Even to me, the student of darkness, these revelations were a source of horror and surprise. So, a bit more thingery there, really, isn't it?
Indeed. Yeah, I mean, the way that read as well is almost biblical, isn't it? the origin of the beast and all that kind of stuff. It's very much Book of Revelations, let he who hath understanding reckon the number of the beast and all that.
Yes. So he kind of thinks on this. Obviously, he's got to tread very carefully. He's got to wait for the right time. And while he's waiting toward the end of August, we get the lamentable death of Sister Therese, killed by the beast at her cell in the Benedictine convent of Zimes. So her brother's warnings, well, it seemed that she did take notice. I get the impression she was killed in her cell, right? So she's not walking out and about in the forest. Well, how did the beast know she was there? Why did it target her particularly? There's questions to be answered.
I thought this was tremendously creepy, this little passage here. On this occasion, the beast was plainly seen by late passers as it ran down the convent wall by moonlight from a window, and others met it in the shadowy streets or watched it climb the city ramparts, running like a monstrous beetle or spider on the sheer stone as it fled from Zimes to regain its hidden lair. You see it skittering down the wall like a giant spider.
Giant spider, yeah. Well, that put me in mind of M.R. James.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not an ink blotter.
Yeah.
It's not a spider. But it's standing behind me. And this is where the law steps in and comes to Monsieur le Chaudronnier and said, look, we know you're a sorcerer. It is not seemly for the church and the law to ally themselves with wizardry, but the need is desperate. In return for your aid, we can promise you a goodly reward of gold and a guarantee of lifelong immunity from all inquisition and prosecution. That's not a bad deal, is it?
It's not. But Luke's, he's despite being an occultist and sorcerer, he seems like a bit of a stand-up chap. Because I ask no reward, I replied, if it be in my power to rid Averoigne of this scourge, but you have set me a difficult task, and one that is happily attended by strange perils. So he's like, yeah, it's all right, I'll just do it. It's fine. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good chap.
Exactly. This is it, right?
Quite rare in Smith, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Now, I do wonder if he's got some inkling of what's going on here, because he asks to have 2 stout men-at-arms sent to him and is going to head off that night to visit Perigon, where the horror seems to centre. So, I think he's got more than a clue about where this beast might be coming from. And I love this. You think if this was like a D&D game, right? You party go, yeah, I've got my +1 sword. I've got the magic spear. We've got shield. We've got plate armor. Luke takes the ring of Ibon and a small hammer.
Yeah.
I was thinking, what's he going to do with that? Tap it on its knee?
Reflexes, right? Check its reflexes.
These stout chaps turn up. They're stout and tested warriors, clad in chainmail and carrying swords and halberds. So they're not daft, are they? They're fully equipped.
Mm.
And we get another little bit of world building here. I mounted the 3rd horse, a black and spirited mare, and we rode forth from Zimes toward Perigon, taking a direct and little used way which ran for many miles through the werewolf-haunted forest. So there is a werewolf lurking around somewhere as well.
Oh, yeah. We had the mention of vampires as well. So, like I say, that's all very commonplace in Averoigne, Luke doesn't need to bother himself with them sort of trifles, Formless horrors from the stars, that's more his cup of tea.
And here we get another one of those great Smithian paragraphs. Swiftly we rode, while the sun sank in a redness as of welling blood among the tall trees, and soon the darkness wove its thickening webs from bough to bough, closing upon us like some inexorable net of evil. Deeper we went into the brooding woods, and even I, the master of sorceries, trembled a little at the knowledge of all that was abroad in the darkness. So yeah, he's got some idea what they're facing. So, he's got some cojones, isn't he, this guy?
Oh, yeah.
And this is where we get pointed out that Theophile's chamber, the window is open, which seems to be an odd thing to do if there's a beast roaming abroad, to leave your window open, your window that faces upon the forest.
The porter told me was his invariable custom, in spite of the oft-repeated demoniac invasions of the monastery. So he's either incredibly brave, incredibly stupid, or something else.
Yes, and I think Lucas cottoned on here because he sets a vigil watching this window. Pale and hollow as the face of a corpse, the moon rose higher, swimming above the sombre oaks and pines, and pouring a spectral silver on the grey stone of the abbey walls. In the west, the comet flared among the lustreless signs, veiling the lifted sting of the scorpion as it sank. They see the taper go out in Theophile's cell, and the room remains dark. And you kind of get that sense of everything. This is the bit in the film where everything goes quiet, right?
Yeah, no score. Yeah.
The two guards, they're sort of ready. They're almost aware of the approach of something.
Yeah, these two men, you kind of feel for them a bit here because they're stood nearer to the forest than Luke, facing it perpetually according to the strict order that he'd given. He was like, right, you two stand there, I'll stand behind you. If you get eaten, I'll clobber it.
That'll give me a chance to clobber it, yeah. And then suddenly it appears. A horror of hellish red light, swift as kindling wind-blown flame that leapt from the forest gloom and sprang upon us where we stood stiff and weary from our night-long vigil. One of the men-at-arms was borne to the ground, and I saw above him, in a floating redness as of ghostly blood, the black and semi-serpentine form of the beast. A flattened snakish head, without ears or nose, was tearing at the man's armour with sharp serrate teeth, and I heard the teeth clash and grate on the linked iron. Swiftly I laid the ring of Auburn on a stone I had placed in readiness, and broke the dark jewel with a blow of the hammer that I carried. Well, there we go. There's his plan. If you want to kill a demon, set another demon on it.
Absolutely.
And we get this great fight between the two. This is like, I don't know, I was trying to think, almost like a Doctor Strange film or one of those kind of things.
I was thinking like a kaiju battle.
Oh, yeah.
You know, Godzilla and Mothra. You know, he's kind of kaiju-esque, isn't it?
Yeah. And it also put me in mind of the film Night of the Demon, which is like, you know, cast in the runes, of course.
Cast in the runes.
Because what you've got, you've got this thing is from outer space. It's an alien, but the demon in the ring, I think that's a good old-fashioned English demon.
Yes, indeed. You can imagine it talking with a cut glass accent and being really snarky, can't you?
Yes.
You know?
I won't be back, but something will.
Yeah.
The devil rides out.
Yes.
So yeah, basically we get a big punch up at the end. But this is quite interesting again how Smith describes this. The body and members of the beast were loathfully convulsed, and they seemed to melt in the manner of wax, and to change dimly and horribly beneath the flame, undergoing an incredible metamorphosis. Moment by moment, like a werewolf that returns from its beasthood, the thing took on the wavering similitude of man. The unclean blackness flowed and swirled, assuming the weft of cloth amid its changes, and becoming the folds of a dark robe and cowl, such as are worn by the Benedictines. Then from the cowl a face began to peer, and the face, though shadowy and distorted, was that of the Abbot Theophile. So again, quite thing-like in the sense of the transmutation. It's not just the straight, oh, now he's a man again. It's that gradual shift, melting in the manner of wax. That's nice.
Yeah, because that does bring to mind, like, you know, the scene, the famous scene with the head and everything and the body, and it's all kind of melted and, you know.
So basically the demon of the ring has defeated the thing from the comet, and having done so, old Luke has promised that, yeah, you're free now. I've freed you from the ring, which he has been living in for quite some time, really.
The thing from the comet versus the demon from the ring. That sounds like mid-80s WWF wrestling from Madison Square Garden.
Oh dear, oh dear.
In the red corner.
The thing from the ring.
The thing from the ring.
The thing from the ring. The thing in the ring. In that case, I suppose.
Yeah.
Why are rings square? There's a question.
It's when you hear commentators describe it as the squared circle. It's like, well, it's not a circle or a square. You can't give me a square or a circle. And now we're into the wonder stuff, and this is how my brain works. You know?
Yes, and I knew that the demon of the ring had fulfilled its promise and had now gone back to those remote and ultra-mundane deeps from which the sorcerer Auburn had drawn it down in Hyperborea to become the captive of the purple gem. And the fallen man at arms is okay. He jumps up. Oh, I'm all right. I'm okay. But they obviously have seen what has happened and seen that it's the abbot. So they're sworn to secrecy. I can't help but feel in some other stories they would have been quietly dealt with at some point.
Yeah.
Oh, the beast got them. But again, this guy is a good chap, old Luke, right? Because he's got no reason to like the church, has he? You know, let's face it, given half a chance, he'll be on the rack and then, you know, on a stake.
Yeah.
He thinks, why should we destroy this man's reputation and his good name? So we'll keep this quiet.
Yeah, because he's kind of martyred now, right? I mean, he's going to be venerated and all this kind of business. So he's done the Abbey an absolute solid here.
Yeah. It's become a place of pilgrimage, isn't it?
Mm.
The tale was accepted without question by the brothers, who grieved mightily for their good abbot. Indeed, the tale was true enough. The theophile had been innocent, and was wholly ignorant of the foul change that came upon him nightly in his cell, and the deeds that were done by the beast through his loathly transfigured body. Each night the thing had come down from the passing comet to assuage its hellish hunger, and being otherwise impalpable and powerless, it had used the abbot for its energumen, moulding his flesh in the image of some obscene monster from beyond the stars. So, a happy ending, in a sense, apart from the 51 people, because a peasant girl is killed as well that night. So we're up to at least 51 victims. Apart from those unfortunates, it's a happy ending. Theophile becomes canonized.
Yeah. But there's that sort of element of unease at the end of it, isn't there? Because in time the comet passed to other heavens, fading slowly, and the black terror it wrought became a varying legend. But one can't help wondering, was the entity banished back to the comet?
Did it really die?
Yeah, is it going to come back round? You know, like Halley's comet reappears every however many years it is. Is it going to come back round at some point? It's wide open for a sequel.
It is, yes, that's very true. And when it comes back, it could be 18th century or 20th century, or yeah. And we end with a very Lovecraftian paragraph, I think. This is Smith at his most Lovecraftian. It is well that none should believe the story, for thin is the veil betwixt man and the godless deep. The skies are haunted by that which it were madness to know, and strange abominations pass evermore between earth and moon and athwart the galaxies. Unnameable things have come to us in alien horror, and will come again, and the evil of the stars is not as the evil of the earth. So that does very much give you the sense that, yeah, the Beast of Averoigne 2 is very likely.
Indeed. Now, it's funny you brought that up, because that line there, thin is the veil betwixt man and the godless deep, I actually used as an epigraph in one of my novellas.
Oh,
you know, at the beginning,
nice.
where you put in the italics. Yeah, I actually used that line, that very line.
That's that looked good on a t-shirt, actually.
Wouldn't it?
Yeah. So the other thing that then I thought at this point was colour out of space. Again, a formless entity that wreaks havoc on anything it comes into contact with.
Yes.
I wonder how sentient this thing was.
Yeah.
Was it using the abbot's mind to work out what was going on and who to kill? Or I wonder how that worked. Because Jerome and the sister were both targeted. Was that because they were uppermost in his thoughts, perhaps, or something like that? Were they seen as a threat?
Very possibly, because, I mean, yeah, was it a creature of pure instinct and it just latched onto his memories kind of thing? Like, you think, oh, well, this monastery up there is full of nicely fed people who've probably got nice, healthy marrow. I'll go and have a nibble, you know?
There doesn't seem to be any sense that having the marrow, I mean, that's quite an appetite. 50 people in, well, I guess it talks over the period of a couple of months. I mean, most animals, I don't know that animals would eat that much. A shark wouldn't. A shark wouldn't eat 50 people, would it, in that time? I'm not sure that a tiger or a lion would, to be honest.
No, I mean, that kind of appetite is more akin to scavengers like crustaceans and things like that, and insects, because they just constantly eat.
I must be a crustacean.
I was going to say, apparently, according to study, crabs are the most efficient scavengers on Earth. There you go. There's a fun factoid for you all.
and probably our future overlords. I, for one, welcome our new crustacean overlords.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Coming here, giving it all that. That joke doesn't work on the podcast.
It's a visual joke. Yeah. Brings to mind, we'll have to cover a guy N. Smith on the IBC.
Yeah.
Night of the Crabs or something. It's got to be done.
Slime Beast.
The Slime Beast. Yeah.
Classic. I don't know, for some reason this put Cthulhu in my mind as well.
Yeah, because Cthulhu comes from Fomalhaut, and it was basically like a living comet, kind of living fireball kind of thing.
That's it.
Yeah.
Fire vampire, kind of.
Indeed. Well, fire vampires were his servitor.
Right.
Which is quite interesting, considering that was a creation of August Derleth. I do wonder.
Yeah, I think there's lots of threads drawn from this. And I just want to mention again the werewolf of Averoigne, because I didn't know this. Is something I recently found out, that there were lots of story fragments and seeds that Smith put out about Averoigne. I think there was about 6 or 7 or maybe 8 of them that were small ideas for future stories. And the one for the werewolf of Averoigne reads as follows: an anchorite suspected of sorcery in the forest of Averoigne, who keeps a pack of savage dogs of which he is inordinately fond. Several of these dogs are killed by the local peasantry and nobility, and in revenge, the anchorite turns himself into a werewolf and attacks the slayers of his dogs. The anchorite werewolf, cornered one night by a well-organised hunting party, is driven back towards his hut and is there slain by his own dogs, who recognise him only as a wolf. So a typical Smith ironic kind of ending.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, because the synopsis he wrote in that book was: a terrible semi-human thing, progeny of a sorceress and a demon, which terrorizes the wood of Averoigne.
Right. So a slightly different origin, but that idea still.
Yeah. Then sometime later, he jotted down another idea with the title "The Beast of Averoigne," which fleshed out the core idea of the unknown predator terrorizing the forest, but went down this route. So sometime between these two jumble of notes, he sort of went, I don't really want to do a straight up werewolf. Let's have a blobby thingy thing from beyond the stars.
Well, we often say about Smith, his aliens are alien, aren't they?
Oh, absolutely. That's one of the things I love about them.
Yeah, your Venus stories and your Yovombis and everything else. It's not the bloke in the rubber suit, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And although Smith only obviously wrote a certain amount of Averoigne stories, there are others who have picked up the torch, so to speak, and continued it, because Pickman's Press in 2019 released a collection entitled The Averoigne Legacy. This is over 24 stories and poems of Averoigne, including some never before published by mythos authors like DJ Tyra, Richard Tierney, Ron Hilger, Brian McNaughton, Michael Minnis, and James Chambers. I have to admit, I wasn't aware of this before, so I've put that on my Amazon list. It's available on Amazon.
I've got it. It's good. It's a decent collection. There's some really good stuff in it. Yeah.
So I was thinking maybe either as a Patreon episode or when we've gone through all the Smith stories, that might be an interesting one to look at and work through some of those stories as well. I believe there's stories and poems, right? Yeah.
There's another one as well on Hyperborea. Well, I think there's like 2 or 3 different anthologies of Hyperborea stories. But yeah.
Now, the authors we just mentioned are not the only people who have been writing lately, because we've had quite a lot in on the mailbag from our last episode. So shall we start with Facebook?
Indeed, yes, because this is in response to, basically I had an earworm and I couldn't remember for the life of me where it came from. I knew it was from Iron Maiden song, a line, "Hear the Mandrake Scream." Now, Tobias Nilsson, who I suspected would have the answer, writes, "Sorry, gents, been a bit behind on my podcast listening. Hear the Mandrake Scream is indeed from an Iron Maiden song. It's from Moonchild off the Seventh Son of a Seventh Son album. Of course it is. The album is primarily about Aleister Crowley, which leads me to wonder if the mandrake might have been part of the whole sex magic thing he had going on. Well, yes, it did. Also, illiterate Swede. I feel seen, and I don't like it. Nice.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for that, Tobias. And
hear the mandrake scream. Yeah.
He's singing again. He's singing it. We've got a lot of comments on YouTube as well. Let's start with, this is great. This is a great story. This is from Rick Kennett. Back in the 90s, during one of Weird Tales' many resurrections, I had 2 stories accepted, one at 3,000 words and one at 9,000. The 3,000 word story was published, but I was sent a check larger than expected. It turned out to be for the 9,000 word story. I advised them of this mistake, but they never replied and never published the 9,000 word story before going belly up. To this day, I am possibly the only Weird Tales writer to have ever been overpaid.
Tremendous. Absolutely brilliant.
And I responded to that. That's amazing. I like to think that somewhere CAS and HPL are punching the air.
Yes. Yeah.
Because, of course, as we were saying last time, not only did Smith have to wait for months, he was underpaid on the publication of the Mandrakes.
Yeah. Now, we actually have a couple of messages about the Kentucky Fried Movie, which you brought up. The first one is from Heather Poirier. Also, I saw the Kentucky Fried Movie in the theatre when it came out, Lasai, with my parents. By silent agreement, we sat in opposite sides of the theatre so that we could laugh and enjoy without mutual embarrassment. I've seen Kentucky Fried Movie many times since. We've all been there, right? Like you're watching something on the telly and somebody takes their kecks off or something and you don't know where to look, right?
Yes, maximum embarrassment. Yeah. And Heather continues, another great episode, gentlemen. Thank you. With regard to the monomania seen in weird fiction, I've been working on the idea of the Lovecraftian gaze. I gave a paper at Necronomicon Providence last year on it that I believe was well received. Aside from its necessity as a literary device, i.e. one must have the narrator look at the big ooze, or otherwise there's no story, there's something else that both draws the narrator in and urges him from within. It's an idea I may explore in future papers.
Great idea.
Yes, very interesting. And again, it is part of this, well, when you're writing any type of fiction, especially horror fiction, if you have a story that says, we walked past an old house, we heard a noise, we carried on walking, end of story.
Yeah.
Right? So that idea of being pulled in somehow, whether that's through an external force acting on you, or whether that's a result of your own monomania, or even in the case of a lot of the James stuff, that pride. No, this isn't happening. I'm a chap.
Yes.
This isn't possibly da-da-da-da-da.
Yeah.
There has to be something to pull the person into the situation.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a nice observation, I think.
It is. Now, we have, we're going back to Kentucky Fried Movie now, and a bit of a tangent from Yurik Diveta. Quite a tangent, nothing related to Smith, but the mention of Kentucky Fried Movie rang a bell. I never saw the film, but I remember it was sampled in the Velvet Acid Christ track Melting, which is a banger of a tune. I have to just jump in with that, which made me reflect on how movies and series samples in song seemed quite prevalent at a certain time, and led me to discover and then watch some great ones. One example is that I discovered the wonderful miniseries 10th Kingdom from an Infected Mushroom song, Roll as a Giant. Has the practice of adding these samples gone to the wayside, or am I just listening to too much mainstream music nowadays? You're just listening to too much mainstream music nowadays. Now, from a personal perspective, the guitarist in Groovy Green, Pete, says, I can't be trusted. He turns his back for 5 minutes and there's a sample in the song. For example, the intro to one of our tracks, The Shuttered Room, samples the trailer from that movie. And there's Evil Dead samples and things like that. And
Nice.
you actually find that quite a lot of bands, such as people like Skinny Puppy, use a lot of samples from things like Reanimator, The Evil Dead, and From Beyond, and all these sort of Lovecraftian films. So yeah, it is still out there. It's just more the more esoteric end of the musical spectrum, let's say.
Yeah, it's certainly something we did in the phobias quite a lot. You drop in a few lines from a film here and there in a lot of songs. Yeah, the track that springs immediately to mind for me is Big Audio Dynamite, E=MC²,
Nice. Yep.
which had a lot sampled from one of my favourite films, Performance. I don't send solicitors letters. I just apply a bit of pressure. Yeah, so prime example. I did answer to Uric. I did wonder if it was because things became more litigious over time.
As long as you stick the low 30 seconds, you're all right.
Right. Yeah. And he actually replied to that. Yeah, that makes sense. It was an interesting form of pop culture referencing. It made me look up things such as Paradise Lost, Jacob's Ladder, etc. Yeah, so I think that's a nice thing. You hear something in a song and that, where's that from? And that leads you to something else. That's the way good art works, isn't it?
Absolutely. I love samples. I mean, I'm a huge fan of people like Pop Will Eat Itself and My Life with a Thrill Kill cult, so of course I like samples. I mean, the Poppies, they did that song Hit the High Tech Groove, which was all samples.
Yeah, and I guess it's most thought of in the sort of hip hop community, isn't it? Really, but it's certainly quite widespread in what you call like industrial, sort of goth sort of area as well.
Indeed.
Partly because there's so many good samples to be had.
Absolutely.
out of all these films. And we've also got 2 messages in from Valzane Lumavix. I don't know if this is worth mentioning, but this was the first story of CAS that I read. This is referring to the Mandrakes from last episode. I had already read all of Lovecraft's stories by then, and that is how I became acquainted with CAS and what led me to seek out CAS's works. It left a good impression on me, and I continued reading his stories. Yeah, it's a pretty good one to start with, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, and you replied, didn't you, that yours was Genius Loci?
Yes, which we're going to be covering this season. So, yeah, you'll get my Smithian origin story when we get to that one.
Yeah, mine was Return of the Sorcerer.
Oh, right.
That was the first one I read.
Was that in a sort of collection or something? You remember?
Yes. Yeah, it was in one of those big old books of horror stories.
Ah, right.
I think it was in the same one that had like the Willows and things like that in Shining Pyramid and all that kind of stuff. I'd love to find out what that was, but yeah.
Yeah, because I think we said that was one of his most widely published stories, wasn't it? The Return of the Sorcerer. Yeah.
It was, yeah. Yes, Valzane Lumavix also writes, speaking of the word amatory, I thought this passage from The Thing on the Doorstep and Other Weird Stories, edited with an introduction and notes by S.T. Joshi, would not be out of place. Why would such a man as Lovecraft, who up to this point had expressed an interest only in literature, science, colonial antiquities, and other intellectual subjects, and who at the age of 29 had expressed a complete inexperience in amatory phenomena, suddenly plunge into marriage? To be sure, Lovecraft was one of the most asexual beings on record. Perhaps he thought that his marriage would also be largely an affair of the intellect. Certainly, his strange March the 9th letter to his aunts unwittingly suggested that marriage to Sonia might be slightly preferable to boredom and suicide. But perhaps a much later work, the story The Thing on the Doorstep, provides some hints, although even these may be unwitting.
I'd have to read The Thing on the Doorstep again, I think.
Yeah.
Having said that, I'm always very wary about psychoanalyzing people from a distance of 100 years and what they might have written in a letter.
Same.
Because someone could take a transcript of us in the future, and if you see it on the page, but then you hear it spoken, that could give you 2 very different thoughts, right?
Indeed. And plus, there's also the, who knows what goes on behind closed doors, right?
Yeah.
Maybe they were at it like rabbits. We don't know.
Well, yeah, as for being asexual, I mean, Lovecraft possibly was of a mindset of a particular time and generation that just didn't talk about those things.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly what I mean.
Yeah. Well, we go back to Victorians.
It's that Victorian attitude.
Yeah. And we know what was going on in Victorian times. How do we know? Because we're all here.
Yes, indeed.
So, let alone all the various other things that we know. So, yeah, maybe. I'm not saying Joshi is wrong there by any means, but I don't know. It is an interesting one to raise. And I think I'm right in saying that a lot of the letters to and from Sonia Green were destroyed. I think, didn't she destroy a lot of the letters when they divorced?
I think so, yeah.
So I guess in that sense, we'll never know what went on between them as such. We have some ideas, I guess. I mean, to be fair, he hasn't gone full. Was it Sprague de Camp who did the biographies of Robert E. Howard and Lovecraft
Oh, yeah.
and went totally overboard on the psychoanalysis?
Sex spell Sprague de Camp going overboard. There's a shocker. You have read his pastiches, right?
Yes. Well, yes. I mean, on the plus side, it's a bit like the Derleth thing. He did bring the Conan stuff out. It's a double-edged sword, isn't it? But yeah.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, thank you for that, Valzane. Very interesting points. And we finish, as we started, with Niels, Black Cavalier, our Auburn correspondent. Leafy Sods, new stoner metal band name. Absolutely. Along with, what did you say at the start? Poddy Franz, wasn't it?
Poddy Franz.
Yeah, lead singer of the Leafy Sods.
Yeah.
And something we did forget to mention at the start was Niels interviewed Ron Hilger just recently. Yes, my interview with Ron Hilger, editor of the Smith Collections, will be in my next 12 Leagues to Averoigne Zine. So, of course, we'll put the link up to that as soon as we get it. Yes, Ron Hilger and the late Scott Connors, of course, are the chaps responsible for editing this fine collection of Nightshade books that we're drawing from. This entire podcast, really. Well,
Yeah.
apart from the poetry, perhaps.
And the films, which there aren't many. But the letters. That's Hippocampus, the letters.
Yeah, speaking of the letters, there's no real mention in Dawnwood Spire, Lonely Hill of this. There's just one mention of, glad you got Beast of Averoigne published. And that's pretty much it. It seems as we're going further on, there's less and less talk about the actual stories between them.
Which is interesting because it seems there's more and more with Derleth as we go along.
Yeah.
Because I think, like I say, saying their relationships were quite different. Whereas Smith and Lovecraft tended to talk about all kinds of crap. Smith and Derleth, it seemed to be mostly business.
Yeah.
So I guess if it was that end of it, he would talk to Derleth. If it was a sort of like that kind of, Yeah.
I mean, we get the occasional complaint about Farnabesius and all the rest of it. But yeah, generally it's Lovecraft describing his trip to Florida or whatever it is, or discussions on what makes weird fiction and that type of stuff.
Well, interestingly, in one of those letters that I read out earlier, the paragraph before the paragraph talking about the Beast of Averoigne, he was talking about Lovecraft being in San Francisco and how he was seemingly enjoying himself and all the rest of it.
Ah, right. Nice. Yeah, so thanks for sending those comments in, folks. We do have some more as well, but we'll cover those next time. Yeah, we're always interested to hear what people are thinking, any corrections, particularly in our pronunciations. And all this speculation it's grist for the mill, isn't it? It's a great part of covering these old stories.
Oh, absolutely.
And of course, the fun continues next episode, season 4, episode 3. With which story are we looking at next time, sir?
Next time we're looking at one I am not familiar with at all, but it actually seems to be a fairly long one by the name of A Star Change.
No, I'm pretty sure I've not read that.
I know I haven't.
Yeah. I think most of us, we've read like the Averoigne and Zothique and so on, because they were the ones that were put out in various collections.
The Panther books, right? Yeah.
I'm guessing this is science fiction then, probably.
I think it leans in that direction, yeah. From what I've just had a brief scan, yeah. It looks quite interesting.
Excellent. Looking forward to that. Hope you can join us, folks. Thanks again for listening today. Thanks for everyone who has signed up as a patron and helped support the show. Of course, if you'd like to join that merry band and help us spread our tentacles, check out our Patreon site. Remember, as a patron, you get access to all our bonus episodes for Strange Shadows and the Innsmouth Book Club, free entry to the Innsmouth Literary Festival, and a quarterly copy of Innsmouth News, which will be dropping on your digital doormat anytime soon. So with that, from sweltering North Bedfordshire, it's goodbye from me, Rob White.
And from utterly hellishly hot Brighton, it's goodbye from me, Tim Mendes.
Those bloody comets, eh?
Yeah, I know, right?